She was in the right terminal, and she knew it because her name was already on to the list. So when the woman walked up to tell her she didn't belong there, Zeta didn't move. The booking confirmation was on her phone. Her name was on the list. She had handed her carry-on to the desk attendant 6 minutes ago and was now standing near the window with a brief she needed to finish before the ration starter flight, minding her business entirely. Kiara had seen the carry-on first, then the woman holding it. The math she did was instant and wrong. Zeta did not hear Kiara approach. She felt her. The specific disturbance of someone crossing a room with intent, the way certain people moved through spaces like they were already in an argument with them. Excuse me. Zeta looked up from her phone. The woman in front of her looked expensive, and the way she smiled made it clear this wasn't going to be polite. This is a private terminal. I know, Zeta said. Then you know you're in the wrong place. The smile held. The eyes didn't match. A slow look. Shoes, dress, carry on, back up to face. The kind of inventory that wasn't really about clothing. The main terminal is back through those doors. You really can't miss it. Zeta held her gaze. She didn't move. I have a booking. I'm sure you think you do. The woman stepped closer. Close enough that it was no longer a conversation but a positioning. She didn't correct her. She didn't argue. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she didn't waste words on people who didn't matter yet. But people like you always end up somewhere they're not supposed to be. I'm trying to save you the embarrassment. You're welcome. People like you. Zeta let the words sit in the air between them. Let the room hear them clearly. Then she said very evenly, "Oh, people like me, Zeta. Let that sit, just long enough. You heard me." The woman turned to the desk. "Attendant, can someone help her find the correct terminal? She seems confused." The attendant opened his mouth, closed it. "She's not confused." The voice came from behind them, and the room shifted. Gian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 2 men stood behind him, silent, watchful. He stopped beside Zeta, not in front of her, beside her. He looked at the woman in the expensive coat. Kiara, one word. The temperature in it did everything else. She pivoted. The smile recalibrated in under a second. Warmer now, directed at him. The performance shifting audiences without missing a beat. Gian, I was just helping. I saw what you were doing. His eyes moved briefly to Zeta. Something in them, not quite an apology, but the sincere acknowledgement of one offered without theater. Then back to Kiara. We're leaving. He looked at Zeta once more, quietly. I'm sorry for this. Zeta met his gaze for exactly 1 second. Study, unhurried. You didn't do it. She went back to her brief. He watched her for a moment. 1 moment. Longer than necessary. Then turned and walked toward the bay. Exit. Kiara followed, her heels sharp against the marble. The terminal exhaled. Zeta turned a page. Read the same paragraph twice without absorbing it. Filed the whole thing away, under things that happen, and went back to work. Stay right here. Because the woman who stood still in that terminal is about to walk into a courtroom, and the woman who humiliated her is about to find out exactly who she's been dealing with. This story is just getting started. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're new here. The car pulled away from the patient terminal before Kiara finished her first sentence. Can you imagine? She snapped, standing there like she belonged in our terminal. And then you apologized to her. Kiara, you embarrassed me. I've heard enough. He turned from the window to look at her, then fully directly, with the particular quality of attention that made my people feel examined rather than seen. This is not the first time. The way you speak to people, the way you move through rooms deciding who matters and who doesn't. A pause, deliberate, final. It will not happen again. Kiara opened her mouth. Something in his face closed the argument before it started. Not anger, something worse. Exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of a man who has made a decision and is no longer interested in the conversation around it. The rest of the drive was silent. Outside the terminal, in the mild afternoon air, Zeta's father's car was exactly where he said it would be. Emanuele Ferrari was a man of precise habits and reliable appearances. She got in and sat quietly. Her father waited. He had always known how to wait. Someone decided I was in the wrong terminal, she said finally. He glanced at her back at the road and I had a booking. So she leaned her head back against the headrest. I'm tired, Papa. Your mother made pasta e fagioli. The smile came before she could stop it. Then, I'm less tired. He drove in silence. The comfortable kind. Home was warm. Emanuele Ferrari had never been interested in size as a statement. Comfortable, full of books, the particular warmth of a space that had been genuinely lived in. Her mother, Sophia, met her at the door with the pasta e fagioli already in a pot and questions already forming. You look tired. Did you eat on the plane? How was the conference? Why didn't you call when you landed? Mama, I'm just asking. Mama, I just walked in. Sophia Ferrari absorbed this without offense. She had 4 decades of practice absorbing Zeta's particular brand of gentle resistance and redirected immediately to the soup, which was, as always, exactly right. Dinner was warm, familiar. Your sister didn't wait this long, her mother said, gently. Mama. Her father said nothing. Zeta went to bed that night thinking about the ADMI case, the filing deadline, the witness statement she needed to review, the argument she was still shaping. She thought about the conference. She thought about what she needed to do tomorrow. She did not think about the private terminal. She did not think about the man who had appeared beside her, like a room reorganizing itself. She did not think about the one moment just slightly longer than necessary when he had looked at her before he left. She told herself that very deliberately and almost believed it. Giancarlo Rossi had built a life where things worked because he expected them to. People, systems, outcomes. Chiara had been one of the few decisions he already knew needed to end. He had been looking for the exit for a while, not because he made decisions carelessly, but because Chiara had slowly shown him who she really was. The airport was not the first incident. It was the one he had watched happen to a woman standing completely quietly still, a woman who had held her ground without a word, and then gone back to her brief without performing her composure for the room. He was still looking for the clean exit when Chiara found it for him. The video surfaced on a Tuesday. Chiara shouting, a waitress trying to de-escalate, shove, and a fall that turned everything public. By Wednesday morning, it had been viewed 400,000 times. Thursday, Rossi's family lawyers had contacted the waitress, a 23-year-old named Amelia, working 2 jobs, no savings, no legal representation. The letter was dressed in formal language, but the message was simple. We will sue you for disrupting our client's evening and damaging her reputation. Settle now, or face proceedings you cannot afford. Amelia sat in her small apartment with the letter on her kitchen table and did not know what to do. Zeta watched the video once. Then again, by the 3rd time, she had already decided. She made 2 calls, found Amelia through a mutual contact by Friday afternoon. I can't pay a lawyer, Amelia said. She was trying to hold her voice steady, not quite managing. I can't even. You won't need to, Zeta said. Amelia looked at her. Why would you? Because I watched the video. Zeta folded her hands on the table. And I know what I saw. And someone should say so in a room where it counts. The hearing was on a Thursday morning. Chiara arrived with her family's legal team. 3 lawyers. Expensive suits. The coordinated confidence of people accustomed to outcomes that money shapes before the proceedings begin. She scanned the courtroom the way she scanned every room quickly, categorically, the practice sorting of spaces into people who mattered and people who didn't. She saw Zeta at the plaintiff's table. Dark suit, natural hair pulled back, reviewing documents like the room didn't matter. Chiara's eyes moved over her. A flicker of something crossed her face. Then a small sound. A dismissal. She said something to her lawyer without taking her eyes off Zeta. Her lawyer looked away, said something back that she didn't seem satisfied by. Then the session began. Zeta stood, stated her name, stated her capacity, counsel for the plaintiff, and for the first time, Chiara actually looked at her properly. The sound Chiara made was small, involuntary. Her lawyer put a hand briefly on her arm, a professional studying, the practiced gesture of someone managing a client who had just understood something they hadn't anticipated. What followed was not complicated. Zeta did not make it complicated. She presented the case with the same economy she brought to everything that mattered. Precise, unhurried, no decoration. The video, the cant, witnesses, the medical documentation of Emilia's shoulder injury, the timeline of the threatening letter sent to a woman with no resources 48 hours after the incident, the pattern established through 2 prior documented incidents of Chiara using her family's legal apparatus as a weapon against people she had harmed. She didn't raise her voice once. The ruling didn't take long. Guilty. Substantial fine. Formal record. The counter-threat against Emilia was dismissed, with costs awarded to the plaintiff. Emilia was crying quietly in the second row. Zeta squeezed her arm once briefly, then gathered her documents. Outside on the courthouse steps, the afternoon was bright and cold. Zeta came through the courthouse doors and stopped to put her files in her bag. She was thinking about her next case. She looked up. Giancarlo was at the bottom of the steps that he had come for, to the proceedings. She would understand later why the specific sense of responsibility he felt for what Chiara had done in the world while wearing the implicit credibility of his name. He was standing with 2 of his men, hands in his pockets, and his eyes were already on her when she came through the doors. Recognition landed on both of them at the same moment. The terminal. The apology. The brief. Something moved through the air between them. Quick, unspoken, the specific electricity of 2 people who have thought about a moment more than they've admitted and are now standing inside it again. Then he walked up the steps toward her. She didn't move. "Avocado," he said. "Hello. I didn't. I know it was your. It doesn't matter." His voice was quiet, direct. "You took her case. That matters more." He looked at her for a moment. "You won." "Emilia won," Zeta said. "I just made the argument." Something moved in his expression. That particular quality of attention, the kind that processed what was actually being said rather than what was being performed. "I owe you an apology," he said. "A proper one. Not in the middle of a scene, you already not properly." He held her gaze. "Cafe? Whenever you're free, wherever you want." Zeta looked at him. No entitlement in the ask. No assumption of yes. "People don't actually do that," she said. "I do." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and produced a card, held it out. "In case you ever need a lawyer," she said. He took it. "I'll be the judge of that." She almost smiled, went down the steps, and got the Maris in a cab. He watched it until it turned the corner. Then he stood there for one more moment in the cold, bright afternoon with her card in his hand. He ended things with Chiara that evening. He drove her home from the courthouse. She had insisted, and he had agreed, because he intended to say what needed to be said, and he preferred to say things once directly, without delay. She talked for most of the drive about the ruling, about the fine, about the lawyer, that lawyer, and how the whole thing had been handled unfairly, and how her father's team would be filing an appeal, and how Gian needed to understand what this had done to their family's reputation. He let her talk. He had learned with Chiara that interruption only lengthened things. At her door, he stopped. "This is done," he said. She turned, read his face, Something shifted behind her eyes. The first, real fear he had seen there beneath all the performance and the certainty. The lifelong assumption that things worked out for her because they always had. What do you mean us? It's done. You won. Her voice recalibrated softer now. The version from the beginning when she was still working at it. Our families. Your father. Everything we've built is my concern to manage. He looked at her, steadily. Not a reason to continue something that should have ended a long time ago. You can't just. She stopped herself. Tried again. We are supposed to get married. That was the plan. Our families. Buona notte, Chiara. He turned, got in, the car. The door closed. She stood on the step, watched the car, until it was gone, stood there in the cold for another moment after that. Then she went, inside, sat in her apartment in the silence, and felt something harden past the hurt, past the shock into something colder and more purposeful. She picked up her phone. He wasn't leaving her for nobody. She was going to make sure of that. A month later, a quiet bookshop. Zeta wasn't really reading. She was thinking. She heard him before she saw him. Or rather, she felt the particular reorganization of a space that happened when Giancarlo entered it. He came around the corner of the aisle and stopped. They looked at each other. The lawyer, he said. The man who apologizes for other people's behavior. The corner of his mouth moved almost. Giancarlo, I know who you are. She closed the book. Zeta Ferrari, I know. At her expression, I asked after the courthouse. She absorbed this, filed it. The girlfriend is not my girlfriend. A pause. Hasn't been for 3 months. Zeta looked at him for a long moment. The careful assessment she brought to everything, reading the fact of what was being said rather than the presentation of it. Then she turned back to the shelf and replaced the book. Good for you, she said. He leaned against the shelf across from her. Unhurried. Café. The apology I still owe you. You apologized at the terminal. That was a statement, not an apology. He watched her scan the shelf. There's a difference. Is there? Zeta said. Zeta stopped scanning the shelf, turned to look at him, properly. People really don't do that, she said. I do. She looked at him for another moment. Then can I at least get your number? In case I need a lawyer, she laughed. A real one, surprised out of her. The kind that couldn't be managed, because it arrived too fast. She gave him the card again. He already had one. She suspected he still had it. But he took this one without mentioning that Café was at a place she chose, her neighborhood, her terms, her comfort. He arrived without a driver, without the infrastructure of his world. Just him in a coat, 5 minutes early, already seated, when she got there with the look of a man who is content to wait. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about Chiara, plainly, without bitterness, without the performance of a man trying to make himself look good in the retelling. A family arrangement that had never been a real relationship. A decision made for strategic reasons that he had stayed in, past the point of sense because he hadn't had a clean reason to leave that. Wasn't just this isn't working. What changed? She asked. He looked at his cafe, then at her. I started understanding the cost of staying. She nodded slowly. Let it sit. Didn't press. She told him about her work, the cases that mattered, the ones that kept her at her desk at midnight, the ones where the outcome was the difference between someone's life going one way or another. He listened the way turned. She had noticed he listened completely, without waiting for his turn, asking questions that showed he had actually processed what she'd said. He asked her to dinner before their cups were empty. Dinner turned into more time, more conversations, something steady, something intentional. Her mother noticed at Sunday dinner, 3 weeks, in the particular difference in her daughter's face, something slightly easier, slightly less contained. Sofia Ferrari did not miss things like that. Who is he? Mama. I'm just Mama. Her father's eyes met hers, across the table. The familiar alliance. He said nothing, which was its own kind of support. He asked her on a Tuesday evening her apartment food they had, and attempted to cook together and mostly failed at something involving rice that had somehow gone wrong at the most basic level, which had produced genuine laughter from both of them, which had felt like something. He looked at her, across the counter, with the expression she had catalogued by now, the one that arrived when something confirmed what he already knew. "I want you to be my girlfriend," he said properly. "If you want that." She looked at him. "Yes," she said, simply, without deliberation, the way she said things when she already knew. His parents' home was warm in the way of spaces that had been genuinely lived in for a long time. His mother, small, sharp, the specific intelligence of a woman who had navigated her husband's world for 40 years and emerged with her character entirely intact. Read Zeta in the first 20 minutes and asked real questions for the rest of the evening. Not social questions, real ones about her cases, about her father, about what she believed in, what she was building, what mattered. Zeta answered without performing. Straight, warm, exactly herself. His father said less, watched more. Halfway through the main course, Zeta mentioned her father's name in the context of a case she'd referenced. Emanuele Ferrari, retired judge. Marco Rossi put down his chopsticks. Emanuele Ferrari, he said, it the way people said names they recognized from somewhere important. Then he looked at his son, then back at Zeta, something rearranged in his entire expression. The patriarch's assessment dissolving into something warmer, almost delighted. "Your father and I did business together. 6 years ago. A man of complete integrity. Absolute." He shook his head slowly. "How is he?" Zeta blinked. He's well. He never mentioned. He wouldn't." Marco smiled. "That's exactly like him." In the car afterward, Gian held her hand across the console. She was dead, looking out the window at the night city processing. "Our fathers," she said. I know. Did you know?" "No." She turned to look at him. "Is that strange?" He looked back at her. "It's perfect." Chiara found out who Zeta was, and she didn't like what she found. She started following them. Not personally. She wasn't careless, but she had ways of knowing where Gian went, who he was with, what it looked like. She collected it, built a picture, and then one afternoon she made a Preisensplächt mistake. They were at a market, the open kind, Saturday morning, vegetables and flowers, and the ordinary business of two people moving through a weekend together. Gian had her hand. They were looking at something, heads close, laughing at something she couldn't hear. Chiara was there before she had decided to be there, so it was because of her. Her voice came out louder than she intended. People nearby turned. Gian and Zeta both turned. Chiara's eyes were on Zeta. Something wrong in them. Past performance, past strategy, just the exposing fact of a wound that had been building for months. "I knew it." Her voice shook, slightly. "The way you looked at her at that airport, the way you looked at her outside the courthouse. I knew it then. I just..." She stopped, looked at Zeta with something that had moved past jealousy into accusation. You did this, deliberately from the beginning. You planned this, Chiara." Gian's voice, the quiet kind. She didn't stop. "Boyfriend snatcher. You sneaky little Chiara." Harder, now. Zeta held up one hand briefly. "I have this." She looked at Chiara. The same, unhurried quality of a woman who had stood in front of hostile energy her entire career and understood that matching it was never the point. "If he was that easy to take," Zeta said quietly, "what does that tell you about what you had?" No one spoke. Chiara's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The argument she had prepared, the accusations, the evidence she'd collected, the things she'd rehearsed in her apartment, all of it meant that single sentence, and found nothing to stand on. Jian stepped forward. His voice was very quiet, very final. If you come near her, again, near either of us in any form, you will understand what it costs to test to me on something personal. Do you understand me? Kiara looked at him. At Zeta, back at him. Something in her face collapsed. Not dramatically, just quietly, the specific deflation of someone who has just fully understood that the thing they were fighting for is already completely gone. She turned, walked away, through the market crowd without looking back. Jian watched until she was gone. Then he looked at Zeta. She was already looking at the flowers on the stall in front of them, picking up a stem, examining it with the focused attention of someone choosing carefully. You okay? He said. I'm fine. She held the flower up. What do you think for your mother's dinner? He looked at the flower, looked at her. The expression, the one he'd been carrying since a private terminal 14 months ago, settled into something that had nowhere left to go but forward. Perfect, he said. He went home that evening and made one call. Traced the leaked story, a gossip column piece that had run 3 days earlier. Anonymous source. Zeta's name attached to speculation about her motivations, her career, her relationship with Gian back to Kiara in under 2 hours. His people were efficient. They always were. He called Kiara directly. The story you planted. He didn't preface it, didn't ask. It landed on nothing. Her father, and my father, did business together for years. My mother has met her. You built something on ground that was already solid before you started digging. A pause. The next time you involve yourself in my life in any form, I will make sure every door my praisen family's name has ever opened for yours closes permanently. This is the last contact between us. He hung up. Kiara sat in her apartment with her phone on the table and understood completely, and finally, that it was over. Not the relationship that had been over for months. The possibility, the idea that she could reverse it, the story she had been telling herself about how this ended, all of it over. She sat there for a long time in the silence, in the fact of it. Then she closed her eyes and stayed very still, and let it be what it was. His mother's birthday dinner was on a Saturday in early December. The house was full, in the way it only got for the occasions that mattered. Family, old friends. The particular warmth of a home that had been hosting people for decades and knew how to hold them. His mother moved through all of it with the ease of a woman who had built something real and was content to be inside it. Emanuele Ferrari arrived with Sofia and found Marco Rossi within 10 minutes. The two men shook hands and then stood talking for the rest of the evening in the way of people who had picked up exactly where they left off, as if 16 years were simply a pause in a longer conversation. Zeta watched her father laugh, the real laugh, the one from home, and felt the thing in her chest she had been carefully not naming for months. Gian appeared beside her. She felt him before she saw him. She always did now. Your father hasn't stopped talking, he said. Neither has yours. They stood together, watching the room, comfortable. The specific ease of two people who had stopped performing for each other a long time ago. His mother tapped her glass from across the room. The warm noise of the dinner settled into attention, the natural quiet of people who sensed something was happening and wanted to be present for it. Gian turned to Zeta. She read his face, understood what was coming, and felt beneath the surprise she was still genuinely feeling that she had known this was where they were going. Since a Saturday market, when she'd picked up a flower, and he'd said perfect in a tone that wasn't about the flower at all. He went down on one knee. He didn't make a speech. He said what he meant, the way he said everything that mattered directly without decoration, with the full weight of someone who did not. When you were challenged, you chose what was right when it mattered. I want a life with you, Zeta, properly, permanently. The room was very quiet. Her mother had both hands over her mouth. Her father was watching her with the expression of a man who had always trusted his daughter's judgment and was watching it be confirmed. Zeta looked at this man who had appeared beside her in a private terminal and apologized for something he hadn't done, who had found her in a bookshop and remembered her cafe order, who listened when she talked and meant what he said, and had never once asked her to be anything other than exactly what she was. Yes, she said. For the second time, the last time, the one that counted most. The room came alive. Emanuele Ferrari shook Marco Rossi's hand again, and this time both men were grinning in the way of fathers who had just watched something good happen and knew they had been in some quiet way part of making it possible. Gian slid the ring on her finger and stood and looked at her, the way he had looked at her since a private terminal when she had stood, completely still under pressure and not moved an inch, like she was the fixed point. If this story moved you, subscribe for more stories like this. You won't want to miss what's coming next. If someone disrespected you like that, in public, what would you have?